I parked the car off a narrow road by a large stretch of bogland. The clouds are low in the sky. It's raining lightly now. There's a sharp, metallic light in the air, as if the dark clouds are holding their breath. I know the rain is about to get a lot heavier.
Hello. Noel, how are you?
But I'm meeting someone who says he has a story that I absolutely need to hear. I can see a disused peat processing plant a couple of 100 yards away. This story starts on a normal day in 2003 when the plant was still in operation. Everyone was going about their work until someone noticed something in the machinery, something that just wasn't peat.
It had already entered the peat processing machinery, and only for a local here, Mickey Burke, he's the man who spotted it, stopped the machine and called in the experts.
Headlines, roadblocks, a community full of talk and speculation.
We don't understand why the brutality, we don't understand what was going on, so that's still the mystery for us. Who was he? Why did it happen? Why did it happen here?
He was an Iron Age man found in the bog in the townland of Cloneycabin. A man killed in a brutal way before being buried in the bog.
They're people. Human beings are human beings, and humanity has not changed. I have shivers up and down my spine thinking about what happened here.
This is the Discovery series, The Bog Bodies, a 4-part investigation into what happened to 2 men found in the bog and the world from which they came. 2 men known to us as Cloneycabin Man and Old Croghan Man, killed and laid to rest in a bog that preserved them to an eerie perfection for over 2,000 years. I'm Fionn Davenport. I've spent most of my career as a travel writer uncovering interesting stories, but stories like the one we're about to hear are as fascinating as they are unsettling. They're mysteries that have generated far more questions than answers, but that's exactly why we're here. To understand this story and what happened to these men, I travel across Ireland to the sites that were important to people in ancient times, where they lived, where they worshipped, where they celebrated, and where they died. Along the way, I meet those with a special connection to the Iron Age and the world in which our 2 victims lived. Some of them were on the scene when they were found. Others have dedicated their lives to figuring out what happened to them and why. And I think we'll also discover that the people of the Iron Age, roughly between 800 BCE to around the 4th century AD, were a lot closer to us than we think.
We have to remember that these were people. Always, always, always. They're like us in so many ways. And yet there's this big chasm that opens up that says, but you had to die that way. And I find that rather sad.
They must have felt, looking up at the moon and the stars, that the gods were there to be placated.
They are crouching them, they're putting them back in a fetal position, bringing them back to as they were in the womb. That says an awful lot about somebody.
Our people have come here for thousands of years. We know this. And whatever they were up to, maybe there's a trace of that left in the land. Maybe there's something there for you.
But first, we return to that small clearing by the bog in Cloneycabin, just outside the village of Ballivor in County Meath. Local historian Noel French has just pulled up, and our story can begin.
So that's the landscape that he came out of.
You'd describe it as broody, wouldn't you?
It is broody, yeah, but it is a broody landscape. The other thing about it is it's wide open to the sky. You see, we're so used to today on flatlands in various places that you can see the whole sky. But back 2,000 years ago, you wouldn't have seen the whole sky unless you came out here and you would have seen it 360 degrees.
Take us back to 2003 when you first heard about the discovery.
We'd sort of given up about finding any more bog bodies because the mass production of the bogs had gone on from the 1940s. And then in February 2003, this bog body was found. And this was a lucky find here. It had already entered the peat processing machinery, and only for a local here, Mickey Burke, he's the man who spotted it, stopped the machine and called in the experts. Police had to be called in and everybody had to be called in.
That's a remarkable discovery to make. Did it damage the body when he was lifting it up?
Bog bodies tend to be partially preserved. It depends on how much air, it depends on the temperature. So we might have found all of Cloneycabin Man that was available to find, or the rest of it might have been there and it's gone. disappeared through the machining.
When Mickey found the body, like, did the word spread really quickly
The
around
word
the
spread
village?
around,
Yeah.
yes. The first thing is the Gardaí, the police, because they need to know that the body is not a recent murder victim. They look at it, and then the National Museum is the next.
So it's fairly quick in kind of determining that this was a much older...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And then the word, sure, the village must have been up around.
Yeah, it would have been big news. It would have been big news in the area and in the country. Like this would have been front page news.
It really was huge news at the time. Everyone had an opinion, everybody wanted answers. But while the chatter swirled, the serious work had already begun. A specialist team was pulled together to preserve the body and start figuring out who this man was and what had happened to him. And, as with any death involving violence, that team included the then Deputy State Pathologist, Dr. Mary Cassidy.
He had obviously been injured. He had been in the bog for some considerable time, and as part of that, the body had been compressed. And so we literally had, it was almost like, a 2D figure rather than a 3D figure. He had an elaborate hairstyle, an updo, this very complicated way of fashioning his hair. And it's only when we looked at that in more detail that we could actually see that there were extensive injuries to his head. In some way that had concealed what exactly was happening. And he had evidence of 3 major blows to his head, to the top of his head and to the front of his head and across his face. And that split open his skull and obviously damaged his brain. And that would have been the immediate cause of death in him. But he also showed evidence of the extreme effects of the bog in that the limbs, the arms were really shredded to some extent, and the bony structure had become very softened. So he was what I now know was a typical bog body in some respects, but he had met a very violent death.
He'd also been disemboweled. Did that happen post-mortem? Do you think that it happened as part of the killing?
It's sometimes quite difficult when you find unusual injuries or unusual trauma in a body is to decide, could that have happened? Was it pre-mortem, before death, at the time of death, or after death? And of course, we are dealing with the bog bodies, and these bodies are being found because there's been some machinery has been excavating the area. That's a possibility. But this looked as if the abdomen had been sliced open. And that could have been torture, but it also could have been that they disemboweled him after death in a way to preserve the body, because the bowel is full of bacteria, which causes the putrefactive reaction in the decomposing body. And it may have been an effort to make sure that he was well preserved when he went into the bog.
Back then, Eamon Kelly was keeper of Irish antiquities at the National Museum of Ireland, and he hasn't forgotten the moment the news reached him.
I remember the call coming in and telling us that a bog body had been found in Ballivor bog, which was one of the Bordnamona commercial bogs. The body was not in situ. In fact, it had been found in a machine used for screening turf. We didn't know how long it had been in that machine. We didn't have any idea what age this body might be. I mean, it could have been somebody who ended up in the bog 100 years ago, because the bodies are very, very well preserved. So you can't really tell just by looking at them. So it was very important to get it into the museum laboratory so that consolidation of the remains and research on the remains could take place.
What does consolidate the body mean?
Well, when a bog body comes in, it's mainly tissue and water. And if the water dries out, the whole thing will crumple. The skin on the body will have been converted to a leathery-like substance. But when a body is found, normally it will have its external limbs intact. It'll have the internal organs intact. So the heart, the lungs, the kidney, the liver, they're all there. the final meal should still be in the stomach. But if the body dries out, it just withers up and it loses its form. So what's done in the laboratory is the body is soaked in polyethylene glycol, otherwise known as PEG, and the PEG displaces the water in the cells. And then when that process is complete, the body is put into a freeze dryer that drives off all the water, but the PEG remains in the cells and prevents everything from collapsing. So although there is a very small amount of shrinkage, the body comes out of the process pretty much looking like it was when it was found. There was a whole process, like the body, it had to be x-rayed, there had to be pretty well an autopsy done on the body in conjunction with Mary Cassidy. The body was fully investigated to determine, if possible, the cause of death, which was fairly obvious, mind you.
As Eamon, Dr. Mary Cassidy and the rest of the team continued their work, the picture slowly began to form. They learned he was young, about 5'2", and that he wore a striking hairstyle, a kind of Iron Age mohawk, shaped and held in place with pine resin. When the lab results came back, the resin turned out to come from somewhere in the Pyrenees, on the border between what are now Spain and France. Let's just ponder that for a moment. A man who lived in what is now Meath in the 4th century BC styled his hair using pine resin from the Pyrenees. How did he get the resin? Where did the idea of the hairstyle come from? Was it local fashion or an imported trend? That discovery alone raises a bunch of fascinating questions. It also suggests that Cloney Cabin Man was no ordinary man. Whoever he was, he moved in circles of wealth and status. Cloney Cabin Man was somebody important. But there was still another detail the team couldn't ignore. He had died violently, and that's the bit that still troubles Noel French.
I have shivers up and down my spine thinking about what happened here.
Yeah.
What happened here was brutal, but we don't understand why the brutality. We don't understand what was going on. So that's still the mystery for us. So we know some of what happened, but why it happened is the big question. But this poor man, in his early 20s was executed. The question is why? Who was he? Why did it happen? Why did it happen here?
These were all important questions the team was still trying to answer. But then, just 3 months later and only 30 miles away, news broke of another discovery.
When Offaly farmer Kevin Barry went down to the bog near Dangan yesterday, he expected to spend most of the afternoon digging out a drain. Instead of that, Mr. Barry's work was brought to a sudden halt late in the afternoon when he spotted something suspicious in front of the mechanical digger he was using.
That something suspicious was another body, this time in the bog on the edge of Croghan village. For Kevin Barry, it came as a shocking surprise.
I thought I seen a leg. I don't have a digger and I looked and I seen it was a human's hand or nails. So I had it in the book at that stage and I spread it out on the ground, and there was 2 arms and upper part of the body. I couldn't believe that was a body.
Mr. Barry holds the view that the body he found may have been in the bog for more than 400 years.
He had no way of knowing it at the time, but he was out by about 2,000 years. Once again, Dr. Mary Cassidy was called to the scene, where the archaeologists on site had already confirmed what they were dealing with, another ancient body.
The body was incomplete. The skin was rather leathery, but the limbs attached, because we had the upper part of a torso, so the head was missing. We had the arms and with the upper part of the torso, legs missing. But even the arms were rather floppy, which is not what I would expect in a modern day body. I mean, it was only later that I found out we were dealing with something that was 2,000 years old. I mean, that hadn't even crossed my mind how old the remains were at that particular point of view.
So you now are with the body of Old Croghan Man. So tell me a bit, what did the forensic examination of the body tell you about his death?
The head was missing. Was that something that had happened in the bog? So that if there was a machine that was harvesting peat, could it have caused damage to the remains? Or was this something that happened after death? Or could it even have been the cause of death in this person? In addition to that, I noticed that there was an injury to the left arm. And then after a while, it became obvious that the way the skin had folded, it was quite difficult to actually see the whole area. But with a little bit of teasing, I was able to see that there was a large wound in the upper part of the left side of the chest. The injury to the arm and to the chest were what we call sharp injuries, so they'd been caused by something sharp. And the one in the chest looked like a stab wound. So it looked as if he had been stabbed. Now, the position of the wound being in the left upper chest suggests that could be a fatal wound, because the trajectory into the body means that it would have pierced the lung and possibly the heart, causing death. These are deliberately inflicted injuries, and therefore either deliberately inflicted before death, which might be a form of torture, or could even be inflicted after death.
I don't know to what extent you can glean anything from an examination of these two bodies, but did you get any sense of how these men, or anything about their lives from your post-mortem examination?
Well, I mean, not that I know much about that era. It certainly wasn't around at that time, but you always think of life being very hard, and, you know, the life, they must have had a hard life. Well, old Croghan man, I mean, his hands were smooth. I mean, I was so taken with his hands because we could see his fingerprints. We could see every line in his hands, almost as if, the day he had died, there hadn't been any deterioration at all. His nails were, almost looked as if they'd been filed across. So he wasn't a man who was used to, hard labour. So it looked as if he could possibly have had, been from some of the upper classes, and may have had quite a nice life.
All right, let's just take stock for a moment. Now we have two Iron Age bodies found within 3 months of each other, only 30 miles apart. Both astonishingly well preserved, both showing obvious signs of a violent, deliberate death. That's a pretty incredible coincidence. I mean, the discovery of two bog bodies in a relatively short space of time is itself a pretty unlikely scenario. But what really gets me are the details. Cloney Cabin Man's hairstyle, a trendy do that wouldn't look out of place today, all held together by resin sourced thousands of miles away in the Pyrenees. Old Croghan Man's perfectly manicured fingernails, a body that spent over 2,000 years in the bog with recognisable fingerprints. These two men who were clearly important in their communities, but who were brutally killed in remarkably similar circumstances, roughly around the same time 2,300 years ago, give or take a couple of centuries. At this point, we're only beginning to peel back the layers. Old Croghan Man's discovery triggered a second major investigation. Many of the same experts were called in again, including Eamon Kelly and his team at the National Museum of Ireland. Although Cloney Cabin Man was immediately identifiable by his distinctive hairstyle, it was actually something else that captured the team's attention this time, the remarkable length of Old Croghan Man's arms.
The first impression was very striking. The head of collections, who went down to bring the body back to the conservation laboratory, he told me that all the way back to Dublin, he was waiting on these arms to wrap around him in the car because he had placed the body on the back seat of the car, but it totally creeped him out, and he's well used to dealing with these types of remains.
It must have been a strange thing, though, or it must have been strange and exciting for you and your team of pathologists and archaeologists, because, as you said, it's not as if bog body findings are that common. So you have one happens, and then 3 months later, another one.
Oh, yeah.
Both of equal significance.
And both of the same period. I mean, these men could theoretically have known each other. That's the extraordinary thing. They're only 30 miles apart, basically. Quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
So the place where it was found was still intact. So I went and had a look at the site, and then we decided how we would go about exploring the ground to see what other information we could get about the circumstances surrounding the deposition of old Croghan Man. And when I went down to the site, the first thing I noticed, the thing I immediately noticed at the edge of the bog was Croghan Hill, which is an ancient volcano. You know, so it's a very striking conical mountain in the middle of a very flat Irish Midlands, and there was a mound sitting on top of that, which was, even from, you know, a bit of a distance away, you could tell was an ancient cemetery mound of some sort. And that cemetery mound turned out to be the place where the kings of Offaly, the Uffálaga, were inaugurated as kings right up through the Middle Ages. So obviously this was a very important location. So all of that then had to be looked into in detail.
I was struck by Eamon Kelly's description of Croghan Hill, a coronation spot on the top of an ancient volcano, right in the heart of the Midlands. Now, I've been travelling around and writing about Ireland for over 30 years, but I've never actually climbed Croghan Hill. Listening to Eamon, I realised that to even begin to understand anything about Old Croghan Man, I needed to see the place for myself.
So it's 234 metres above sea level, and it's 100 from the school to the top. So you do get, for a short little spurt up, you get a good view. And of course, it's going to be 360 in another 30-40 metres.
To get a sense of Croghan Hill's importance, I'm joined on my climb by Amanda Pedlow, Heritage Officer with Offaly County Council.
So this is your first pause point, really, to get a vista. I mean, for a very, very short climb, you get a benefit very quickly. So you can see the vistas already opening up to you a bit more now.
So now you can see the other side of the hill.
Yeah.
And there's the bog.
And it goes the whole way around, the whole of the Bog of Allen. So you can imagine if that was lake and you were in your little dugout canoe.
Yeah.
And you were, you know, arranging a meet-up was a significant place, and people are all going to have to gather. And you say, where are we going to meet? Whatever date it is, time, whatever way you read the seasons, Croghan Hill, you know, you're not going to miss it.
Where's the discovery site relative to here?
Over on this section here. So when you're looking out, it's the boundary line between Old Croghan Townland and Clonarl.
As someone who's from the general area, it must have been an exciting...
Oh, it was a huge discovery. Yeah, of course it was. Yeah. I mean, it was a huge find, for sure. It wasn't just the find, it was the layers after that, all that research that the National Museum did that added to it, you know.
Let's just take this 360-degree vista in for a second. I imagine that, like in the ancients, they could have seen all four corners of Ireland from here.
Yeah, and everywhere where you're seeing brown now and it's harvested out, you can imagine the huge series of lakes that you would have been looking out on. So after the Ice Age is drifting away, you're left, and don't forget, the volcano is made of different rock, it's basalt, so it's not like the whole rest of it, of the Midlands, is a lot of limestone till left behind by the eskers, and this has risen up above that. So everything about it would have said something different. You know, It would have signalled a real, obviously, feature in the landscape, but when people came here, the stone was different, the shape was different, the context was different. So we're not 100% sure, because no excavation has been done on this mound. It's described as a burial mound, but you can imagine, you know, whatever time you pick in history, as you say, today, even with all the information that we have, you still come up here and it feels like a magical place. You really feel it's a privilege to be here, to be looking out at the vista that you have. You get a different otherworldly sense of connection, and you do feel that you're connected, higher than the plains around. It's spectacular.
I'm standing here at the top of Croghan Hill. And we're here because we're trying to uncover the mystery of what happened to old Croghan Man, who was found just at the bottom of the hill in a bog in 2003. And the mystery of him is so bizarre. Like, he lived at the same time as Aristotle and, Plato and Alexander the Great, about which we know loads, you know. But because nothing was written down, we know so little about Old Croghan Man, other than the fact that we found this maybe chieftain in the bog. He was clearly someone of some importance, but like, to really kind of get a sense of who he was, we need to know more about the world in which he lived in and the things they liked, the things they ate, you know. And I think that's the key to solving this mystery, is to kind of explore the world in which Old Croghan Man lived and died. And I don't know, maybe coming here is the start of that, is a sense of like trying to maybe not unearth a clue, because we're not going to unearth anything, but to feel something standing here, just to have a feeling of, and it's an impressive sight, like this hill in the middle of the flattest pancake landscape that clearly was incredibly important, this ancient volcano that then became a Neolithic site, that then became an Iron Age site of huge significance, and then afterwards a Christian site. So this hill in the middle of Offaly is important, and I don't know, maybe standing here I thought I'd get a sense of Old Croghan Man, because it's not that long ago. But we talk about ancient Ireland like it's somehow out of reach, like it's so far away, but it's not that far away. It's just over 2,000 years ago, which obviously in human life terms is a long time, but it's actually not that long ago. If trying to get closer to Old Croghan Man took me to the top of a hill in Offaly, Noel French went a little further away to feel his connection to bog bodies.
I've been lucky enough to go and see Talon Man and Groball Man in Denmark. There was nobody else in the museum, only me. And Talon Man had a room to himself. And I just sat there and looked into his face and tried to make a link with him. I did think I did make a link with him. That was just amazing.
What did he have to say to you?
Humanity, human beings are human beings, and humanity has not changed.
Humanity has not changed. That's quite something to consider, and I should do the same thing. I'm going to go sit with Old Croghan Man and Cloney Cabin Man in the National Museum of Ireland.
The fact that you can see somebody who lived in that period, and you tried then to see that life through his eyes. What were the thoughts going through that guy's head as he knelt before these guys that were going to kill him? And it looks as if he willingly knelt before them, because there are no defence wounds.
Their deaths were deliberate deaths. For whatever reason, there was a decision made that these men had to die. They didn't seem to put up much of a fight. They didn't seem to be defending themselves much. It didn't seem like a fair fight to me. This was something that was inflicted on these men. It was pretty brutal, and by the examination that I had, they probably accepted that this was what was going to happen to them.
Why would two powerful, physically striking men kneel before their killers and accept such a brutal death? What kind of society and what kind of belief system could lead them to that final moment? To find out, we need to understand the world they lived in and the forces that shaped their fate. Next time on the Discovery series, The Bog Bodies,
we have to try to think ourselves back into the landscapes that these people saw and lived in, their lived experience, if you like.
This is where they are coming to be seen, forge alliances with others, trade to resolve disputes.
They were people that walked about, had hopes, fears, dreams, ambitions, had bad tempers, bit their nails. They were exactly like us.
Ireland has plenty of ancient sites that you can explore from the Neolithic age right to the early Christian period. To find out more, go to discoverireland.ie.